Welcome to Globewise Entertainment. Today, we're diving deep into the wild, raunchy, and utterly ridiculous world of 70s cinema with our countdown of 13 raunchy 70s films so ridiculous they defined an entire generation. From outrageous teen hijinks to over-the-top comedies that pushed every boundary, these films captured the spirit and the scandal of an unforgettable decade. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that subscribe button now so you never miss our deep dives into Hollywood's craziest, funniest, and most shocking movies. And while you watch, tell us in the comments, which of these wild 70s films is your favorite? Get ready, because the first movie on our list is about to take you straight back to the era of disco, bell-bottoms, and cinematic chaos. 13. Bobby Joe and the Outlaw, 1975. A wild ride of love, crime, and pure 70s chaos. In the rebellious spirit of the 1970s, where rules were meant to be broken and stories pushed every boundary, Bobby Joe and the Outlaw crashes onto the screen like a speeding muscle car with no brakes. The film follows Bobby Joe, a small-town dreamer craving excitement, and Lyle, the Outlaw, a reckless drifter with a criminal streak and zero regard for consequences. When their worlds collide, it sparks a dangerous romance fueled by adrenaline, bad decisions, and a thirst for freedom. What starts as a thrilling escape quickly spirals into a chaotic road trip of crime, robberies, shootouts, and impulsive choices that only dig them deeper into trouble. But what made this film unforgettable for audiences back then wasn't just the outlaw action, it was the unapologetic boldness. The film leaned hard into the raw, provocative energy of the era, mixing romance, rebellion, and risque moments that shocked and fascinated viewers alike. At its core, this isn't just a crime story, it's a snapshot of a generation chasing freedom at any cost. The chemistry between the leads gives the film its heartbeat, making you almost root for them, even when you know they're headed straight for disaster. And that's exactly why Bobby Joe and the Outlaw became one of those so outrageous you can't look away films. It captured a time when cinema wasn't afraid to be messy, daring, and completely unpredictable. Would you risk everything for freedom and love, or know when to hit the brakes? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more forgotten, controversial classics that Hollywood doesn't talk about anymore. 12. Kentucky Fried Movie, 1977. If there was ever a film that screamed, everything goes in the 70s, it was Kentucky Fried Movie. This anarchic sketch comedy, produced by the legendary John Landis and featuring early work from future comedy icons like David Zucker, Jim Abrahams, and Jerry Zucker, was pure, unfiltered chaos. Imagine a movie made entirely of parodies, fake commercials, and absurd sketches, some so outrageous they made audiences both laugh and squirm in disbelief. From a kung fu cooking school to spoof news reports, every scene felt like a dare. Could you push the boundaries of taste any further? The answer, apparently, was yes. Its most infamous moment, the Fistful of Yen segment, spoofed martial arts films with over-the-top gore and slapstick violence that left viewers either gasping or doubled over in laughter. Why it mattered. Kentucky Fried Movie didn't just make people laugh, it defined a generation's appetite for irreverence. It broke every rule in the Hollywood handbook and inspired a wave of parody films that still echo in movies today, from Airplane to Scary Movie. Its audacious spirit captured the rebellious energy of the late 70s, a time when cinema was less about rules and more about daring to shock and entertain. Fun fact: despite its shock value, the film's absurdity gave it staying power. People still quote lines, parody scenes, and reference sketches nearly 50 years later, proof that ridiculousness never truly goes out of style. 11. Flash Gordon, 1974, the outrageously sexy space parody that took 70s madness to the moon. If you thought Star Wars was wild, wait until you strap in for Flash Gordon, the hilariously raunchy sci-fi spoof that turned every intergalactic cliché into a full-blown sex joke. Released in 1974, This film wasn't just a parody of the heroic space adventure genre. It was the poster child for outrageous 70s filmmaking. Directed by Michael Benvenisti and Howard Zeem, Flesh Gordon followed the titular hero on a quest to stop the evil Emperor Wang, who had nefarious plans for the entire universe, plans that, naturally, involved outrageous sexual escapades, mutant creatures, and the most absurd sci-fi gadgets you can imagine. Think laser guns, giant phallic-shaped spacecrafts, and interstellar stripteases. Yes, it was that ridiculous. What made this film truly unforgettable wasn't just its shock value. It was its unapologetic commitment to ridiculous fun. With campy special effects, hilariously over-the-top dialogue, and sets that looked like someone rated a college art class, Flesh Gordon became a cult classic for a generation of moviegoers who didn't take life, or film, too seriously. Despite, or maybe because of, its adult content, Flesh Gordon thrived in the underground movie circuit, cementing its legacy as a film that perfectly captured the spirit of the 1970s, rebellious, experimental, and wildly unafraid of offending anyone. Today, it's remembered not just as a sexualized parody, but as a symbol of a decade that blurred the lines between comedy, camp, and pure, chaotic fun. So, if you're curious about a film that dared to take every space adventure cliché and throw it into a wild sexual blender, Flesh Gordon is your ticket to the most absurdly entertaining corner of 70s cinema. 10. Supervixens, 1975. The wildest ride in sexploitation cinema. If you thought 70s cinema couldn't get any crazier, Russ Meyer's Supervixens smashed every boundary imaginable. This film wasn't just raunchy, it was a full-throttle, over-the-top, technicolor orgy of absurdity, violence, and sex appeal. With Meyer's signature penchant for exaggerated female leads, jaw-dropping action, and cartoonish humor, Supervixens practically screamed, "No one makes movies like this anymore." From the moment George, our hapless hero, walks into a world of seductive vixens, murderous villains, and plotlines that defy logic, viewers were hooked. Scenes of outrageous antics, including epic car chases, improbable fights, and of course, a parade of impossibly super women, made this film both shocking and hilariously entertaining. Critics called it vulgar, audacious, and downright ridiculous, but fans loved every second. What makes Supervixens monetizable today? Its cult status. Retro film fans, late-night movie buffs, and even meme culture enthusiasts can't resist the wild visuals and quotable absurdities. Clips from the movie, reaction videos, and commentary on Meyer's fearless filmmaking style are goldmines for views, engagement, and high CPM audiences who love niche entertainment content. Simply put, Supervixens didn't just push the envelope, it shredded it. For those who adore the wild, unapologetic, and ridiculous side of 70s cinema, this film is a masterclass in chaotic fun. 9. National Lampoon's Animal House, 1978. By 1978, college comedies had already existed, but National Lampoon's Animal House arrived like a disaster nobody could look away from. It was loud, crude, chaotic, and completely shameless, the kind of movie that turned bad behavior into an art form. And somehow, audiences loved every second of it. Set at the fictional Faber College, the story follows the unruly Delta Tau Chi fraternity, a group of lovable troublemakers who spend more time causing mayhem than studying. At the center of it all is Bluto, played by John Belushi in a performance that felt less like acting and more like a force of nature. He didn't just play a rebel. He became the symbol of total, unfiltered rebellion. What made Animal House explode was its perfect timing. The late 70s were full of social change, and this movie tapped into a very specific fantasy, the idea of laughing at authority, breaking the rules, and surviving the consequences with style. It was outrageous, but it was also smart enough to know exactly what kind of chaos people wanted to watch. The film's wild energy helped define a new kind of comedy. It proved that audiences were ready for something rowdier, messier, and far less polished than the studio comedies of the past. The toga party alone became legendary, and lines from the movie spread everywhere, turning it into a cultural reference point for years to come. And the box office proved the madness worked. Made on a modest budget, Animal House became a massive hit and inspired generations of fraternity comedies, college films, and gross-out humor that followed. It was more than just a raunchy movie. It was a declaration that rebellion could be hilarious, and that sometimes the most ridiculous characters end up defining an entire generation. 8. Death Race 2000, 1975. In 1975, audiences were hit with a movie so wild, so bizarre, and so aggressively over the top that it felt like it had raced straight out of a fever dream. Death Race 2000 was not just a film, it was a collision of satire, speed, violence, and pure madness. Set in a dystopian future where a brutal cross-country race becomes a national obsession, the movie turned every rule of common sense upside down and shoved a gas pedal through the cultural nerves of the decade. What made it unforgettable was its outrageous sense of humor. This was a world where drivers earned points not just for crossing the finish line, but for mowing down unsuspecting pedestrians along the way. It was shocking, ridiculous, and darkly funny all at once. Beneath the chaos, though, the movie was sneaking in a sharp criticism of fame, spectacle, and society's appetite for violence disguised as entertainment. That mix of parody and carnage gave it a strange kind of brilliance. At the center of the madness was a cast of unforgettable characters, especially the slick, ruthless racers who treated the entire country like their personal battlefield. Among them, Frankenstein became a cult icon. Part monster, part celebrity, part warning sign for a culture obsessed with winning at any cost. The movie's campy style, outrageous energy, and fearless absurdity gave it a personality that mainstream films simply could not match. Over time, Death Race 2000 transformed from a shocking low-budget oddity into a beloved cult classic. It captured exactly what made the 1970s such a strange and fearless era for movies. Studios were willing to take risks, push boundaries, and let audiences watch something totally unhinged just to see what would happen. And in the case of Death Race 2000, what happened was pure cinematic mayhem. Fast, filthy, unforgettable, and completely ahead of its time. 7. Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, 1970. If the 1970s had a movie that felt like a fever dream dressed in glitter, chaos, and attitude, it was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. This was not a polite Hollywood drama. This was a wild, over-the-top trip through fame, temptation, and total collapse. The kind of film that grabbed the decade by the collar and said, "You thought the 60s were bold? Watch this." The story follows a rising girl group chasing success in Los Angeles, but the dream quickly turns into a trap. Behind the bright lights and loud music is a world full of manipulation, ego, and outrageous decisions. Everyone wants fame, everyone wants pleasure, and nobody seems to know where the line is. That is exactly why the movie became so unforgettable. It was shocking, stylish, and completely unafraid to push boundaries. What made it stand out was its fearless energy. It mixed sex, satire, melodrama, and absurd humor in a way that made audiences stare, laugh, and sometimes gasp all at once. It did not behave like a normal movie. It behaved like a cultural explosion. And that is why people kept talking about it. It captured the reckless spirit of the era, when cinema was breaking rules faster than anyone could keep up. And the title itself became part of the legend. It promised glamour, scandal, and danger, and the film delivered all three with a giant wink and a crooked smile. For many viewers, it was not just another movie. It was a sign that Hollywood had changed. The clean-cut old rules were fading, and a louder, riskier, more rebellious generation had taken over the screen. That is why Beyond the Valley of the Dolls still matters. It was outrageous, impossible to ignore, and exactly the kind of film that defined a decade built on rebellion. 6. The Groove Tube, 1974. In the early 1970s, television was already everywhere, shaping how people laughed, dressed, talked, and even thought. Then the groove tube showed up and did something completely unhinged with that cultural power. It took the shiny world of TV and turned it into a sweaty, absurd, late-night joke. This was not a polished studio comedy. It felt more like a rebellious prank aimed straight at the television era itself. Instead of playing by the rules, the groove tube ripped open the format with a string of outrageous skits, fake commercials, strange characters, and rapid-fire satire that mocked everything from news to advertising to the strange seriousness of pop culture. It was rude, chaotic, and completely unwilling to behave. That is exactly why it connected. Audiences in the 70s were living through a decade of cultural overload, and this film gave them something refreshingly disrespectful. It captured the feeling that the old rules were breaking down, and that comedy no longer had to sit politely in a box. It could be messy. It could be provocative. It could laugh at the world instead of trying to impress it. For many viewers, the groove tube became a kind of underground time capsule. A movie that looked like television had been kidnapped by a generation with nothing to lose. It was bizarre, fearless, and so committed to its own chaos that it helped define the era's taste for shock, satire, and anything-goes comedy. And that is why the groove tube still stands out. It was more than a raunchy film. It was a warning shot that the old entertainment world was fading, and a louder, stranger, and far less polite generation had arrived. 5. Sweet Sugar, 1972. In 1972, Sweet Sugar arrived like a neon warning sign from the wildest corner of the drive-in era. On the surface, it looked like just another lurid exploitation movie trying to grab attention with a rebellious poster and a scandalous title. But once the story kicked in, it became clear this was the kind of film that did not care about good taste, polish, or subtlety. It wanted shock, chaos, and a whole lot of attitude. The movie follows Sugar, a tough woman who gets dragged from one nightmare to the next after landing in a brutal prison system ruled by corruption, cruelty, and total madness. What makes the film so unforgettable is not elegance, but excess. Every scene feels pushed to the limit, as if the filmmakers were asking, how far can we go before the audience gasps? And back in the 70s, that was exactly the kind of daring energy that kept exploitation cinema alive. What gave Sweet Sugar its cult appeal was the mix of danger and ridiculousness. It had everything audiences of that era secretly loved: hardened antiheroes, outrageous villains, sleazy backroom deals, and a non-stop sense that anything could happen next. It was loud, messy, and unapologetically provocative, which is exactly why people remember it. Movies like this helped define the generation because they captured a very specific mood of the 70s: rebellious, unpredictable, and totally unfiltered. They were not trying to be classy. They were trying to be unforgettable. And Sweet Sugar absolutely was. It is the kind of film that made audiences laugh, wince, and stare at the screen all at once. And that is why it still survives as a true cult-era relic. 4. The Warriors, 1979. Gangs, glory, and cult chaos. Imagine this: a neon-lit New York City, a city teetering on the edge of chaos, where every subway station could be your last stop. The Warriors, 1979, isn't just a movie, it's a wild, adrenaline-fueled ride through the absurdly stylish gang culture of the late 70s. Based on Sol Urich's novel, this film turned a gritty urban story into a neon-drenched spectacle that felt like a fever dream. The plot is deliciously simple yet completely over the top. A street gang, the Warriors, must trek across NYC after being falsely blamed for the murder of a rival gang leader. Along the way, they face bizarrely themed gangs like the Baseball Furies, the Lizzies, and the crazy paint-wielding punks. Each encounter is as ridiculous as it is visually striking, giving the film a pulsing, comic book energy. What made The Warriors so memorable and monetizable for pop culture was its perfect cocktail of style and spectacle. The film's costumes, its iconic lines, "Can you dig it?" and its cult favorite soundtrack transformed it into a merchandising goldmine. Posters, action figures, and endless references in video games, music videos, and even fashion have kept the Warriors alive in pop culture decades later. And let's be honest, the sheer audacity of seeing gangs in roller skates, baseball uniforms, or with neon war paint chasing each other across NYC streets is pure 70s insanity. It's violent, stylish, and completely ridiculous, capturing the reckless, experimental spirit of its era. For any content creator or marketer, The Warriors remains a cash cow. From anniversary re-releases to collectible Blu-rays and NFT-inspired fan art, it's a film that keeps generating hype, clicks, and sales decades after its release. If you grew up on streetwise action with a side of neon chaos, The Warriors didn't just entertain, it defined an entire generation's taste for wild, uncompromising style. 3. The Villain, 1979. The Wild West gone completely off the rails. If you thought spaghetti westerns were all dusty showdowns and serious stares, The Villain turned that idea upside down with a slapstick sledgehammer. Starring the legendary Kirk Douglas, the effortlessly chaotic Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the scene-stealing Anne Margaret, this film is a riotous blend of cowboy cliches and absurd comedy. The plot? Simple, if you ignore logic. Kirk Douglas plays a despicably inept outlaw named Cactus Jack Slade, whose plans to wreak havoc are constantly foiled by the bumbling hero, Billy the Kid, in a performance that feels part parody, part circus act. Every scene ramps up the ridiculousness, from exploding saloons to chase sequences that defy gravity and good taste. But here's why The Villain became iconic. It didn't just parody westerns, it obliterated them with style. The film's over-the-top stunts, cheesy dialogue, and completely unhinged scenarios captured the rebellious, anything-goes spirit of the late 70s. It's the kind of movie where you're laughing at the absurdity while secretly admiring just how much chaos they managed to cram into 90 minutes. For viewers today, The Villain is more than a guilty pleasure. It's a time capsule of a generation that craved fun, risk, and a little bit of raunch. And monetization-wise? Its outrageous stunts, over-the-top comedy, and recognizable stars make clips from the movie perfect for highlight reels, reaction videos, and nostalgic countdowns, keeping audiences engaged and advertisers happy. 2. Zardoz, 1974. If there was ever a movie that looked like it escaped from another dimension and landed straight into the 1970s, it was Zardoz. This was not the kind of film that played it safe. It was bold, bizarre, and completely committed to its own strange vision. Starring Sean Connery in one of the most unforgettable roles of his career, the movie dropped audiences into a wild future where fashion, philosophy, and common sense all seemed to have gone on holiday. At the center of it all is Connery as Zed, a fierce outsider with a look so outrageous it became part of the movie's legend. The story follows him into a surreal world where a giant stone head descends from the sky, secrets are guarded by an elite society, and every scene feels like it was designed to confuse, shock, and mesmerize at the same time. It was part science fiction, part fantasy, part social commentary, and all pure 1970s madness. What made Zardoz unforgettable was not just how strange it was, but how confidently strange it was. It never apologized for being weird. In an era when filmmakers were pushing boundaries, this one pushed them right off the cliff. Some people watched it and called it brilliant. Others watched it and had no idea what they had just seen. But almost everyone agreed on one thing: you could never forget it. That is exactly why Zardoz still gets talked about today. It was outrageous, unforgettable, and so gloriously ridiculous that it became more than a movie. It became a symbol of a generation that was willing to let cinema get weird, loud, and a little bit wild. 1. The Cheerleaders, 1973, Sex, Scandals, and School Spirit Gone Wild. The 70s. A decade when Hollywood decided that high school wasn't just for learning algebra but for exploring every conceivable teenage fantasy. And nowhere is this more obvious than in The Cheerleaders. This film wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural phenomenon for anyone who wanted a taste of scandal, silliness, and sheer ridiculousness rolled into 90 minutes. Directed by Paul Glickler, The Cheerleaders followed a squad of sexy cheerleaders who used their, let's say, charms to manipulate football games in their favor. Imagine high school hijinks combined with risque comedy, and you're halfway there. It was bawdy, brazen, and downright outrageous, pushing the limits of what mainstream cinema dared to show at the time. What made it so memorable and monetizable for today's audiences is its unapologetic absurdity. Between the ridiculous pranks, over-the-top romances, and eye-popping wardrobe choices, the film perfectly captured the reckless energy of 70s teen culture. You could almost feel the era's rebellious spirit radiating from the screen. Despite, or maybe because of, its notoriety, The Cheerleaders became a cult classic. It inspired sequels, a generation of copycats, and countless late-night VHS rentals. And here's the kicker. In today's streaming era, nostalgia is money. Clips, commentary, and even memes based on the movie generate engagement like wildfire because audiences love to cringe, laugh, and remember a time when cinema didn't take itself seriously. So whether you're a die-hard 70s cinephile or a curious newcomer, The Cheerleaders isn't just a film, it's a wild, hilarious snapshot of an era that redefined teen rebellion and raunchy comedy forever. And for creators, it's a goldmine of shareable, monetizable content. Think countdown lists, raunchiest scenes ranked, or even reaction videos. The engagement practically writes itself. And that's a wrap on our countdown of 13 raunchy 70s films so ridiculous they defined an entire generation. From outrageous teen antics to over-the-top comedy chaos, these films didn't just entertain, they captured the wild, unapologetic spirit of the 70s like nothing else. If you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button now so you never miss our deep dives into Hollywood's craziest, funniest, and most shocking films. Now it's your turn. Which movie from today's list is your favorite? Drop your pick in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts, and you might even see your favorites featured in our next video. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and we'll see you at the movies.